You close your eyes and drift into a deep sleep. For the next 8 hours, you are completely unconscious, paralyzed, and utterly defenseless. Today, this vulnerability is protected by sturdy walls, locked doors, and soft beds. For 99% of human history, there were no locked doors. You were sleeping on the open ground under a vast, dark sky. This was the Pleistocene epoch, a frozen world practically crawling with some of the most terrifying, highly evolved killing machines our planet has ever produced. You shared the night with colossal cave lions, towering short-faced bears, and saber-toothed cats that weighed twice as much as a modern tiger. Think about your physical body right now. You have no thick hide, no sharp claws, and you cannot run fast enough to escape anything. Now imagine taking that incredibly weak body, turning off its vision and hearing, and laying it flat on the dirt for 8 hours straight. To a hungry apex predator hunting in the pitch black, a sleeping human should have been the absolute easiest midnight snack imaginable. By all biological logic, our ancestors should have been eaten into extinction. Sleeping deeply on the ground was a mathematical death sentence. Yet, here you are breathing and watching this. Not only did early humans survive the terrifying nights of the Ice Age, we conquered them. How did a paralyzed, unconscious ape manage to sleep peacefully while surrounded by hungry beasts that could crush skulls with a single bite? The answer involves a brilliant combination of evolutionary biology, clever social engineering, and the total mastery of a very specific... You might think the primary defense was just a bright, blazing campfire keeping the monsters at a safe distance away from the tribe. But archaeologists have discovered that the light of the fire was only half the story. The real defense mechanism was something they smelled. To understand how your ancestors terrorized the predator's back, we need to look at what actually happens when the sun goes down. When the sun disappeared, your body became completely useless. Human eyes are optimized for tracking movement in bright daylight, not piercing through pitch black. In the dark, you were practically blind. But the creatures sharing the Pleistocene landscape with you had eyes built to absorb starlight. We often picture the saber-toothed cat, but the actual nightmares lurking nearby were far worse. Imagine a pack of... These were bone-crushing scavengers the size of modern lionesses. Fossil evidence from Atapuerca shows carnivore tooth marks directly on... Then there were the massive cave bears. Ugh. They weighed nearly a ton and actively competed with your ancestors for the exact same rock shelters. If a hungry cave bear decided it wanted your cave for the winter, your fragile stick-like limbs and simple stones wouldn't stop it. Listen closely to the dark. Every snapping twig or rustling leaf could be a 300-pound predator closing the distance while you rest. You had no natural armor, no venom, and terrible night vision. To the Ice Age food chain, you were the perfect midnight snack. If your tribe just laid down in the tall grass to sleep without a strategy, the entire group would be wiped out in days. Yet, the hominin population didn't collapse. Instead of being hunted to extinction, your ancestors figured out how to hack the predator's own psychology. You couldn't outrun them, and throwing a wooden spear into the pitch-black darkness is a desperate gamble with a very low success rate. To survive the night, early humans needed a barrier that worked even when they were unconscious. A barrier that predators respected instinctively. They didn't simply use the bright fire for warmth. They completely weaponized the sensory landscape of the dark, using a very specific chemical signature. Predators have an incredible sense of smell, and your ancestors realized that the sharp, suffocating scent of burning wood signaled absolute destruction. By covering themselves in campfire smoke and white ash, sleeping humans stopped smelling like easy prey and started smelling like a catastrophic forest fire.
The mastery of fire wasn't just about staying warm or cooking meat. According to primatologist Richard Wrangham, fire fundamentally changed our biology.
Before controlled fire, your ancestors had to spend up to half of their waking hours chewing tough, raw food just to survive. Cooking unlocked massive amounts of calories, allowing our digestive tracts to shrink and our extremely energy-hungry brains to rapidly expand in size. But Wrangham points out another crucial survival factor. The control of fire gave us the unprecedented ability to sleep deeply and safely on the ground. Before fire, early hominins, much like modern chimpanzees, had to build temporary nests high up in the trees every single night to survive. Sleeping in trees protected them from giant ground predators, but it meant their sleep was incredibly light, constantly interrupted by the fear of falling. When your ancestors finally brought fire down to the ground, they created a brilliant artificial safe zone. It was a glowing ring of ecological power. For the first time in history, a primate could fall into a deep, uninterrupted REM sleep without waking up in the jaws of a leopard. This deeper REM sleep is critical for memory consolidation and emotional regulation. Fire didn't just protect our brains, But remember, fire is not a physical magic wall. A starving cave bear could easily walk right through a small campfire. So why didn't the monsters attack? It ultimately comes down to a deep evolutionary mismatch deeply hardwired into the predator's own psychological makeup. To an Ice Age apex predator, fire is never just a tool. It is a catastrophic, unstoppable force of nature that destroys absolute. Wild animals are instinctively programmed to flee in panic from the smell of burning wood. It universally signals a deadly forest fire and certain death. By keeping a fire burning, your ancestors hijacked this natural terror. They cleverly cloaked their incredibly fragile bodies in there. But maintaining this life-saving illusion required constant, exhausting vigilance. A dying fire meant a broken shield. To keep the fire alive, someone had to stay awake. But your ancestors certainly didn't have alarm clocks or designated night shift workers. If the fire died while everyone was in deep REM sleep, the smoke shield would vanish, and the predators would immediately close in. This brings us to a fascinating biological hack. Have you ever wondered why you sometimes naturally wake up at 3 in the morning? Modern society might call it an annoying bout of insomnia, but evolutionary anthropologists recognize it as a deep ghost of your Pleistocene survival. Historian Roger Eckerch discovered that before artificial light, humans didn't actually sleep in one single, continuous 8-hour block like we try to do today. Instead, your ancestors naturally practiced something called segmented sleep. They slept in 2 distinct phases, separated by a quiet waking period in the middle. They would usually fall asleep shortly after dusk, resting deeply for about 4 hours. This initial phase was simply known as the Then, right around midnight, their bodies would naturally wake them up. For an hour or two, members of the tribe would be fully conscious. During this midnight waking period, they didn't do any heavy work. They simply added fresh, thick wood to the fading embers of the campfire. Keep watch.
The smoke is thick.
I hear something in the trees. Once the fire was roaring again and the perimeter felt entirely secure, they would simply lay back down for their second sleep until dawn. This incredible segmented sleep pattern meant that at any given point in the night, someone in the tribe was naturally awake, alert, and listening. They never needed to force themselves to stay on guard duty. Their biological clocks simply rotated their waking cycles completely automatically and effortlessly. Keep it quiet, little one. The saber-tooth will hear. Please, just for a moment, quiet down. Shh, shh. Because while the heavy smoke successfully deterred the big cats, the sudden sound of a crying baby was an irresistible dinner bell in the dark. The thick smoke of the campfire could blind a predator's nose, but the sharp wail of a human infant pierced right through the dark. Human babies are born incredibly premature, entirely helpless, and dangerously loud. A baby chimpanzee can silently cling to its mother's fur. Your ancient infant had no fur to grab and demanded to be constantly held. From a purely mathematical perspective, a noisy, helpless infant in a landscape filled with nocturnal killing machines should have been an absolute evolutionary dead end. A single exhausted mother could never stay awake 24 hours a day to keep a baby perfectly quiet. It was physically impossible to survive alone. Anthropologist Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy argues that our ancestors survived this nightmare through a revolutionary social system called If a baby started crying at midnight while the mother was in a deep REM sleep, an aunt, grandmother, or brother would instantly intervene. The infant was seamlessly passed around the glowing campfire, bounced, rocked, and constantly kept in physical contact with a warm, protective human body. This relentless, shared physical affection wasn't just a sweet family bonding moment. It was a highly coordinated, desperate. By sharing the immense burden of child-rearing, the tribe ensured that the baby's crying was completely muffled before it could ever echo into the forest. Quiet equals life. A crying baby meant a dead tribe. This ancient survival requirement explains a strange reflex you still see today. Have you noticed how babies almost instantly stop crying when you stand up and walk? That specific rocking motion triggers an automatic evolutionary reflex, instantly dropping their heart rate and forcing them to stay completely quiet to avoid detection. So when you are exhaustedly pacing the floor with a baby at 2 in the morning, You are perfectly executing a millions-year-old predator evasion protocol. Today, you live in the safest environment in human history. You have solid walls, locked doors, and no predators hunting you for dinner. But there is a massive glitch in your system. Your biological hardware hasn't had the time to update to this completely safe modern reality. Evolutionary biologists call this phenomenon an evolutionary mismatch. Your body is running ancient Ice Age software inside a modern. This mismatch perfectly explains why almost every human child is instinctively terrified of the dark and convinced that monsters hide under the bed. Society dismisses this as an overactive imagination, but evolutionary psychology tells us something completely different. For hundreds of thousands of years, the dark wasn't just empty space. It was actively filled with massive beasts that specifically hunted your ancestors. In the Pleistocene epoch, evolution highly favored the paranoid. The hominid who was terrified of every snapping twig usually survived to see the morning. You are the direct, unbroken descendant of the most successfully paranoid and hypervigilant apes to ever walk the face of the earth. This is exactly why you sometimes wake up at night, look into the corner of your room, and clearly see a monster standing there. Within milliseconds, your ancient brain dumps a massive surge of adrenaline directly into your bloodstream, instantly preparing your body to fight or run away. When you turn on the light, you realize it is just a jacket hanging on a chair. But your heart is still pounding violently. Logically, you know you are safe, but the deeply buried survival centers of your brain completely bypass logic to ensure you stay alive. This ancient programming also explains why you often struggle to fall into a deep sleep during your first night in a brand new environment. But to your primal brain, it is an unsecured, unfamiliar territory without a fire. Today, you live in the safest environment in human history. You have solid walls, locked doors, and no predators hunting you for dinner. But there is a massive glitch in your system. Your biological hardware hasn't had the time to update. Evolutionary biologists call this phenomenon an evolutionary mismatch. Your body is running ancient Ice Age software inside a modern. This mismatch perfectly explains why almost every human child is instinctively terrified of the dark and convinced that monsters hide under the bed. Society dismisses this as an overactive imagination, but evolutionary psychology tells us something completely different. For hundreds of thousands of years, the dark wasn't just empty space. It was actively filled with massive beasts that specifically hunted your ancestors. In the Pleistocene epoch, evolution highly favored the paranoid. The hominid who was terrified of every snapping twig usually survived to see the morning. Meanwhile, the relaxed hominid who assumed the shadow was just a bush was quickly eaten, permanently removing their optimistic genes from the human pool. You are the direct, unbroken descendant of the most successfully paranoid and hypervigilant apes to ever walk the face of the earth. This is exactly why you sometimes wake up at night, look into the corner of your room, and clearly see a monster standing there. Within milliseconds, your ancient brain dumps a massive surge of adrenaline directly into your bloodstream, instantly preparing your body to fight or run away. When you turn on the light, you realize it is just a jacket hanging on a chair. But your heart is still pounding violently. Logically, you know you are safe, but the deeply buried survival centers of your brain completely bypass logic to ensure you stay alive. This ancient programming also explains why you often struggle to fall into a deep sleep during your first night in a brand new environment. To your conscious mind, it's just a nice hotel room, but to your primal brain, it is an unsecured, unfamiliar territory without a fire. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, completely unable to move a single muscle, feeling a heavy weight on your chest? Your conscious mind suddenly wakes up, but the chemical lock on your physical muscles remains firmly active. Imagine an Ice Age scenario where a giant short-faced bear silently enters your camp. Waking up and thrashing around in panic meant absolute instant death. Evolution engineered a brilliant firewall. By keeping your body paralyzed while your eyes snap open, you could silently assess the deadly. Today, extreme stress can accidentally trigger this ancient firewall. Without a real predator present, your panicking brain literally hallucinates. When you finally understand this, everything changes. Your insomnia, your light sleeping, and your irrational fear of the dark are not modern biological flaws. They are the exact reasons you exist. You are not broken, you are simply the descendant of the most vigilant, hyper-aware survivors in human history. Your ancestors survived freezing winters, massive cave lions, and the absolute terror of the Pleistocene darkness. So tonight, as you walk through your comfortable, climate-controlled home, lock your sturdy front door, and turn off all the bright artificial lights, take a quiet moment to look out into the dark. The massive, terrifying monsters that once ruled the ancient night are now entirely extinct. You get into your incredibly soft bed, pull up the heavy blankets, and prepare to spend a third of your life in total darkness. You might look at your fragile, unarmored body and think you are completely and utterly defenseless as you drift off into a deep sleep. But you are not. Deep beneath the surface of your modern life, the ancient ghosts of the Pleistocene epoch are still actively standing guard. You finally close your eyes and confidently drift into a deep, peaceful sleep. But this time, you know the ultimate truth. Your weak, fragile human body didn't just survive the terrors of the prehistoric night, it conquered them.